Well, the reason why a high asset divorce might require a different type of strategy is because, you have sometimes complex finances. You might have, for example, hidden assets or assets that are not so obvious. Maybe part of the assets, for example, are stock options that haven't been, realized yet. The value may be subject to interpretation. I'll never forget when we were talking about during the election, there was this whole thing about Donald Trump and whether or not Donald Trump was guilty of a crime because he supposedly undervalued or overvalued some assets. And what was the issue? The government said that, well, his Mar-a-Lago estate was only worth, X amount of dollars. He said, well, what do you mean? You haven't accounted for this and for that and for this and for that. So there was a genuine dispute as to what the actual value is. Well, in a high asset divorce, sometimes there's a real dispute on what the true value is of something. And that's why sometimes it requires a different strategy. Perhaps lawyers who are used to dealing with that kind of thing. Lawyers who are used to saying, okay, we see the value of this asset, but it may have a different true value. For example, sometimes you have IRAs and you want to look at the IRAs and what's the true value. Well, if it's a Roth IRA, it might have a different value than an actual IRA that's not a Roth. Why? Because when you take the money out of a Roth IRA, you have already covered the tax implications. And when you take the money out of a standard IRA for which there were no taxes taken in the beginning, there may be a tax obligation. So the value might diminish because of that. Now, how do you know the difference? Well, lawyers who are used to dealing with these kinds of things, they know the difference. Lay people might say, well, here's an IRA, here's an IRA. This one's 50,000 and this one's 50. You keep that 50, I'll keep this 50. They may not be the same. And that's why sometimes high asset divorces do require a different strategy from a lawyer who's used to handling that kind of issue.
248-588-3333. 248